Hey, looks like we're recording. Welcome everyone to Glam and Grind, our podcast today. We have a super exceptional guest, so I'm excited to introduce you to her. Rach is again off to Utah, so she's unable to make this call today. But I'm so excited because it is a fellow Canadian, which I just found out from Ontario, which is where I grew up. So about a couple hours from my birth home. She is so energetic and so fun to talk to. I can't wait till we get into all of the things. But I do want to do a formal introduction so y'all know who we're speaking to today. So let me introduce Andrea Maxim. So Andrea, luckily for us, has all the things similar to us. So she's a mom, she has a family, she is a CEO, she is the breadwinner, she is a woman first, which is so exciting. And I'm going to ask her all those questions, but basically wanted to let you know about her professional background. So she's a naturopathic doctor, a master mindset coach, a master NLP practitioner, which we'll get into so people can all understand what that is, and a hypnotherapy trainer. So lots of amazing things here. So I want everyone to welcome Andrea today on the show. And Andrea, we are so excited to have you. So thank you for taking this hour out of your day to kind of help us understand how to be better entrepreneurs, how to be better moms, how to slay at all of this game. So welcome. And yeah, take it away.
Thank you so much. And you know what? It's just an honor to be able to come into your community that you've built. And it's just, we need women to rally around other women so that we get what is possible. We also have the ability to share. And I'm one who is fully transparent. So wherever we go today, we're going to go. And just to be able to give my perspective on how you can have it all. And this is coming from a mindset and boundary and energetic conversation as well. Because as women, I find we take on so much. We take on the weight of the world.
We do. And then we expect to be great at it all. So,
right. Yeah. And we can be great at it all. And what I'm hoping that we can really kind of dive deep into today is the interpretation of what quote unquote having it all actually means, because there is the industry norm, Instagram, this is what it should look like. And I've really done so much work on dismantling what success actually looks and feels like for me, to a place where I'm like, this is exactly what I wanted. This is my dream life. If it gets better from here, awesome. And it took a lot of work. It took a lot of tears. As I know, as women, we know what that's like. So this conversation is just going to be amazing. And I can't wait to jump into it.
All of those things are amazing. I'm taking some notes as you're talking because there's things I want to remember to ask you or go back on. But yeah, I would say very similarly to you, I am all about authenticity. And I feel like the world we're living in today is a real struggle, even for my daughter, for other women, to see what reality is versus this submersive Instagrammable world of non-reality, I guess. And so the expectation as well of seeing what one believes is out there for us, and what's happening with all the other people, in constant comparison, constantly feeling like we're not enough, right? We're not doing enough. We're not making enough. We're not being Instagrammable moms doing perfect things for their kids all day long. Like, we have to understand those are snippets of time in someone's life, but perfection is not real, right? I mean, it just isn't. That's why they have filters. And this podcast, I want you to know, we just tape live. So whatever comes out, comes out. We don't go back, fix, change. So because we do believe in the authenticity in the moment. Yeah, sometimes I say stuff and I'm like, oh, that's probably not the best, whatever answer or question or right. But I think it's what we're feeling in the moment, and there's so little of that anymore, that I feel like authenticity is just a non-negotiable for us. And that's in business as well. But so I love how you said, let's reframe, what that looks like. And so you maybe talk a little bit about how did you realize that a reframe was needed for you, and how did you go about doing that? Because I think a lot of people need this help in getting back to reality.
Yeah.
And understanding, what that looks like. So yeah, if you can start with that, I think that'd be a great place for us.
Absolutely. So there was two major events that happened within my marriage that catapulted this shift that we're going to be talking about. The first one happened after I had my second daughter. So here I have a 3 or 4-year-old, my eldest Aria, my youngest Brooklyn. They're 2.5 years apart. I was running 3 clinics, working 8 to 12-hour days sometimes, living with my laptop. Like, my laptop was an extension of my hand. We all know what that's like. So I would wake up, open my laptop, work, go to work, come home, open my laptop. And being a mother was not the focus. Being present with my family was not the focus, because I was in this hustle. I'm not busy enough. I'm not successful enough. I haven't made enough money mindset. And I came home one night, and I was at the dining table, which was an extension of my office. And Aria was just so excited to see me. Again, this is my 3.5, 4-year-old daughter, tugging on my leg, saying, "Mommy, can you play with me now?" And I just brushed her off and I said, "No, Aria, mom's working. I don't have time." And little did I know, Aria went down into the kitchen to where my husband was and said, "When do you think mom's not going to be so angry where she'll actually play with me?" So Scott sat me down in that very moment and said, "Look, you've got to really make some big shifts here, because this isn't working anymore." I just had to calm down our daughter, who all she wanted to do was love on you and play with you. And I'm not putting up with this anymore. And it was in that moment, we have these distinct moments in motherhood in our lives where I can remember everything about that day.
Yeah.
And that was when I started hiring my first employee, starting to, stop believing that I was the unicorn that everybody needed, and started duplicating myself, which immediately gave me my time freedom and allowed me to expand and grow. And then the second big impact was literally just the end of last year. My husband is also a business owner, however, doesn't have the drive to go out and build the business, but is really good at in the business stuff. Like, he is a skilled landscaper, and so he's awesome at his work, not great at necessarily building the business. And last year wasn't a great year for him. So December of 2023, I had been waiting for this conversation to see when it was going to come, and it finally was there. And he said, "I'm out of money. I have no money left. And in fact, I'm in debt, and I can't support you with the bills anymore." This was, again, one of those moments where I was just like, what the fuck am I going to do now? And I didn't even have a choice, which was the catalyst point of a lot of things that came out of this. But I felt I had no choice in the situation, that I had to step up and now be the entire breadwinner for our family, which wasn't something that we had dreamed about. We had talked about it. I never thought that I could do it. And all of a sudden now I was like, well, the livelihood of my family rests on my ability to pay these bills. And how are we going to get Scott out of debt simultaneously?
Right.
It rocked me so much that I blew a disc in my back. Yeah. If we're talking the energetics of rocking your safety and security to the core, I could not walk for 2 months after we had that conversation. Literally woke up the next day, sciatic pain, blew out my back. It was incredible. Now, why I'm telling both of these stories, and why this last one, is because that was the first time where I realized I actually could float our entire family already and didn't have to change a thing. but I didn't know that I could. I didn't believe in myself enough that I could. And now it's been 7 months later, and I have floated us through, camp expenses, Christmas expenses, and regular life expenses.
And debt repayment,
Right.
so that's a whole other thing too. So,
Right. And it really forced us to renegotiate what our life was now going to look like. And we had to renegotiate our marriage and our marital roles, which thrust me into this masculine energy, which is not where we play as women. So I went all the way up into money, breadwinner, finances, power, control. And I had to start to settle myself down by asking my husband, this is where I need you to show up for me so I can still feel soft and feminine and supported by you. And it was a dance. It took us a really long time to recalibrate. And one of the big things I actually had to work through there was ending our marriage at that moment in time and grieving the loss of what our marriage was like to allow for the birth of this new marriage. Like when I tell you energetics play a huge role in this and pain in the body means pay attention, I lived it. On the opposite side now, or on the other end of it, now we're like, okay, this is a beautiful new coexistence where I didn't know that I could be masculine in a financial place, but still feminine in a wife mother role. And he's showing up in other places.
I think that's
I don't know where this is leading us, but
yeah, that's a challenge because I think as women entrepreneurs, especially if we are breadwinners, right? I live for sure. Rachel, I think, as well, but a lot of us live in that masculine energy portion because we are now, like, my husband was a doctor. We retired him out so we could grow the businesses. So it was a bit of a different vertical engagement, but it was a new marriage as well, right? Like, so we're like, okay, you were the doctor that was making all the money. I was, trying to grow a business using your money basically to pay the employees, to flipping where, it got to be where the businesses were the most lucrative part. And had the best return on life for us in the future. So my husband wasn't trading time for money anymore. When you're a doctor, that's all you do, as it's a big port. You have to be there. And even if you try to scale, he had psychometrists, he had all kinds of people, but inevitably we would be on the beach and he'd be writing reports. Like that's just the story of being your own provider with a large practice. And if you're not working, you're not getting paid. That's really what it is, unless you're scaling to have other doctors under you. And we just didn't know, I think, enough about how that structure would look. And in Canada, the insurance things were different, right? So when we got to Omaha, I bought some businesses here in Omaha, and my energy had to go into like, okay, my whole like Bo was going to close the practice. He was like, it's time for us to move there to help you now. So I was commuting back and forth every Monday through Thursday with 4 kids. So I would come home Thursday night, do all the mom stuff, till Sunday night, go back and then be this masculine, breadwinner Monday through Thursday. And so and I was trying to grow the companies. And so there's just a lot of time you need when you're doing that. And we had a conversation. We sat each other down. We're like, okay, like Zoe was crying every night because I was leaving. The kids were sort of be in an upheaval about just leaving Canada to come here. They didn't want to move. There was a lot of dynamics around that. So a very challenging transition for our family. Best move we made financially, I would say personally and as a family, challenging because kids were upset. They came to like a 1,200 student school versus a 400, they're at the top of the chain, 8th grade. Here they knew no one. So a lot of transitioning. But like you said, it is really difficult to have that role as the soft mom who needs to still be womanly and feminine and still have a very strong profile of masculinity and business and finance and leadership. And at that time too, I mean, we're not talking many years ago, but it is still hard for women in the business space to push through some of these barriers, right? Real estate barriers, most of them were men who I was dealing with. There's a lot of things, right?
Yeah.
And I still deal with that today, actually, but we'll talk about that on another thing. But the shift that's required, right, in your marriage, the shift that's required in the growth that you need is and looks very different than what you're used to. And so I think many women and marriages suffer through that if they don't have a supportive partner. So like Bo was willing to give up his profession and become like, he had to do the house stuff. He had to do laundry. He had to help with the kids. I mean, he was naturally like that anyway, but he really embraced that role and took over, and just like whatever gaps there were, he just filled in. I mean, sometimes you have to tell them, you have to kind of give them notes around.
I totally get it. We have a whiteboard list.
Think differently, right? They think very like one thing at a time, or I'm doing like 15, but could not have done the business growth without him in that supportive role, to be honest. And so, but many folks look at us like, oh, it's so great and so perfect. Yes, but it takes a lot of work on both parts, and a lot of conversation, and a lot of being like really vulnerable about how you feel. So like, what do you think the most challenging part in going from this, kind of secondary financial role to being the breadwinner, and also going from, I'm sure some marital rules have changed, some responsibilities in the home. How did you guys get through that? And what do you feel like was the most valuable thing you can share if someone is, looking or maybe going through that right now and needs some help?
The part that I made a mistake on, which in hindsight, and this is my first piece of advice, is I took on the role of financial provider as if it became a power dynamic for me in the beginning, where I was like, well, you're not fucking making anything and I'm making all the money. Like, who the fuck do you think you are? That was like where my mindset was, which is not working. There's still
so was like a defensive mindset, or were you more like angry that you were put in the position, or was it more like, a little bit?
There's a lot of resentment that took me months to heal from and acknowledge how resentful I felt. And because of that, I started looking down on him and really micromanaging. Well, I'm paying the bills and you have to do X, and I'm doing this now and you need to do this. And I personally had to do a lot of developmental growth and mindset growth on my part to let that go.
So what helped you with that? Like, how did you do that? Because I feel like people get stuck there in that, like, well, if I'm going to do all this financial stuff, then you are going to be here. Or the resentment, I think, is natural, right? Because it's like, well, what are you doing to contribute? Like, you're not buying that. You don't pay for that. Or, whatever it might be. I coach a lot of clients, and I get these snippets of, and I mean, we had our, we're our own metamorphosis of how that looked. But I always like to know, what do you think helped? Because I do have a lot of clients that I hear these sort of snippets of like resentment, and I think it blocks them from growth, right? So what would you say to them, or how do you work through that stuff so that they do have a good outcome?
Yep. So the very first place, I had to be very ruthlessly honest with how I was feeling, instead of sugarcoating it or stifling it or being like, it's going to be fine. I was living off of it's going to be fine for months. Meanwhile, my insides were on fire. And I had to really be honest and say, this was fucking not okay. This was not okay for me. This was not okay that you did this to me. And I need you to appreciate that wasn't okay. And I had to first come to awareness and the words for myself and be very honest. And then the second thing I did was I sat Scott down. I said, I need you to really hear me, because this is how I've been feeling. This is what I need you to be aware of and acknowledge. And you and I are going to sit down. We're going to create a plan, because I don't want it to be this. And by this, if you're not seeing our video, my hand, like I'm up here and you're down here.
Mm-hmm.
What we need to do is we need to become equals again in a different way. And I need you to show up because my role feels very non-negotiable. I can't not pay the bills. I can't not pay our mortgage. Whereas you could decide not to clean the house for a week and no one perishes.
Right.
So I also had to come to terms with a lot of that as well of, you know what? He may not do it the way I want him to. He may not do it the day I want him to, but he will get it done. And so there was a lot of patience that I had to give for him to come up and meet me in the middle. But it really did start so much with us just me sitting down and saying, this is how that made me feel. The back pain that I felt from this was real. And that was because of what you did. And it was a violation of our marriage agreement, quite frankly. And I need you to understand how important it is for you to now take on these new roles for me so that I can settle, because we can't survive this way. Right. And for him, his number one core fear is abandonment, and he will do anything to keep our marriage together, which is great. And it's not coming from a fearful place. It is coming from a heart-centered place. And having that conversation, which was very neutral, it was not charged. It wasn't me like slamming open a door and just catching him off guard. We sat down in a really neutral way and communicated about it. Mm-hmm. So the first thing I had to do is get ruthlessly honest with what was actually happening within my brain, how it was making me feel. Then I had to get ruthlessly honest and blunt towards my husband and say, this is how it needs to go. And you need to come and meet me in the middle. Otherwise, I'm going to explode. And then we had to keep checking in. So that's the other thing that I find a lot of women in marriages don't remember is you are constantly renegotiating every week, every month. And as women, we tend to use a lot of assumptions and expectations. And when they're not being met by men, as you said, if you don't tell them directly, they're not going to do it. Then it also fuels this like angry, resentful, I can't focus on my business because I'm mad at you and you don't know why I'm mad at you because I didn't tell you why I'm mad at you. I had to learn how to be direct. And being direct with him really did make a huge difference, but I had to own that. Right. And direct doesn't mean being bitchy or assertive or being really rude about it. It's just being very clear with, this is what I need you to do by this time. It's on the board. I'm expecting it to be done by X. Mm-hmm. And he will show up every time for me when I do that. And when I don't do it, you know.
I agree. I think that there has to be expectations that are actually discussed, because I know I expect a lot as well. And sometimes I'm like expecting or assuming you just know you should do that. And I had a conversation with a girlfriend just yesterday and I was like, oh my God, like, you know, those days where you're just like, what in the actual F is happening here? And not because he doesn't like show up. He shows up all the time, but I do need to have direct conversation. I need to have like little notes like, hey, remember, these are all the things we need to have done by this time. He, like I, gets very ADHD. So we have like 20 tabs open, you know, and I know that with 4 kids, things coming in and out, drop-offs, football games, like he's in charge of that entire schedule. So, I mean, I would die if I had to do any of that, like scheduling, because I can barely get myself in order. So assumptions and expectations that aren't verbalized, or like they need reminders sometimes. And I don't set deadlines. Like I never say by this date. And so when you just said that, I was like, you know what, that's a really helpful hint. And it's not to be, like you said, condescending or anything. It's just like being direct also means delineating and giving a clear guideline like we would anyone else of what that expectation is. So like, and if it can't be done, then that's the conversation. We're like, hey, that's not going to happen this week, you know, and then you're like, oh, and then you're not angry because it didn't happen. Right. So I think a lot of marriages, they operate on assumption because we've been married 21 years. So I just think he knows me, I know him. Right. But it does change, and age changes people too. Like they might get slower, or they might get, less interested in certain things that they were interested in last year. Or I see a lot of, especially entrepreneurial couples working in a business together.
Mhm.
The roles have to constantly be updated, because sometimes it's like that person just isn't the best person to do that job anymore, right? And
Yeah.
so they might have been always the financial analyst in the family, but
Mhm.
now they don't want to do it anymore, or it takes them too long and you need numbers quicker, whatever it is, right? So like when you said it's, I like to about, we'll talk about this, but the all or nothing, like I'm an all or nothing, like you do it all or you don't, right? So we'll talk about that. I know that you have some really great hints on that, but just, I think, tips we can do daily. Like if we have this expectation that it needs to be done for Friday, then let's tell them that, right? Like,
Mhm.
let's not just be like angry when it's Friday and it's 6 and we're pissed off because it's not done, right?
Mhm.
And that, I think all this can apply not only to spouses, but even to your team, your lead, whoever you're leading too.
There isn't one human, including your children, that isn't approachable this way. And we speak to our daughters the exact same way we speak to each other, where we say, this is the boundary, this is what needs to get done. And if you don't get it done, what's the consequence going to be? I just did this yesterday with Brooklyn, my youngest, who wanted to wear the same outfit as Aria, and Aria was pissed that they were wearing the same outfit because Aria doesn't want her little sister copying her. And I said, well, could she throw a hoodie on over top? And if she takes the hoodie off, what is the consequence? And Brooklyn established what that is. That is healthy communication with all humans. And the key part there is, what's the consequence if you don't? And that's something we haven't yet talked about. And I do this with my husband as well. What's the consequence if you don't get this list done and you don't tell me? Well, an easy consequence is I'm going to be fucking
Right.
ragey and I'm going to make your life hell.
I'm
So
gonna be
we
a
don't want
lunatic,
that.
and I'm a
Right.
lunatic, so let's not be a lunatic today. Yeah.
Right. So that's a very easy consequence that men will avoid at all costs, like puppies, right? And
I do
I'm
love
using the
that.
term men as a partner, but I think
Yes, I was just
everyone
gonna
is
say,
afraid.
as a partner,
Mhm.
because there's a
Mhm.
lot of folks on here, obviously, that, are not
Yeah.
gonna be gender specific, but I think in partnership, in business, at home, in a marital partnership, whatever, right? With our kids. I mean, all these things
Mhm.
are applicable. So I'm a Montessori preschool teacher. That's how
Yeah.
all this started. And so we believe in natural consequences, right? So
Mhm.
you do, here's your choices, A or B, and then this is the consequence, C, if these don't work out. And so just bringing me back even to that,
Mhm.
just really makes me think too about how I
Mhm.
can make things different in my own family, instead of being angry when the kids leave all their dishes in the sink, when I've told them 10 times, like, I need you to put these in the dishwasher. I cannot be cleaning up after you for 8 weeks in the summer, or
Yeah.
whatever it is. But there's no consequence. I just get
Right.
angry and pick them up and put them in there, because I'm OCD. And so I can't stand things around.
Right.
And so, maybe there has to be delineation on a time frame, like all the dishes have to be in the dishwasher by 3 p.m. every day, when I
Yeah.
get out of my meetings, and that's the expectation.
Mhm.
And if then you lose, da 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 da, or we have to renegotiate, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So I do like those daily hints that, or tips that can work in so many different avenues of our lives, right? So I'm just thinking, as a mom, as a business owner, and then as a partner, like, these are just really awesome ideas to
Yeah.
just change our mindset too about stuff. And so I want to ask you though, how do
Mhm.
we stop this? This or that mentality, or like that
Mhm.
all or nothing mindset, because I feel like strong people, men or
Mhm.
women, have that, like, it's this or it's that, right?
Mhm.
How do we stop that? What's some tips on, like, how to negotiate an all or
Mhm.
nothing mindset?
The simplest way is by being very careful about your language. And when we say, I can either go here or I can go there, you've already compartmentalized what you can have. And that or a but completely divides the statement.
Hmm.
So I can have a night off, or I can be stressed, from thinking about work, as opposed to I can work a little bit and I can take the rest of my day off. I can sleep in a little bit and I know I'm still going to get those 5 major items done today. I can choose to end work a bit earlier today and I know I can delegate that task to somebody else, and I can do it tomorrow morning first thing and get up a little bit earlier.
So really choose conscientious language. That's really what you're saying about just changing that mindset by, they always say what you speak, you become, or what you speak, is what you end up thinking. So really just changing but and or to and.
That's
Is
it.
that really okay? That's a really great, easy tip, right? For
Yeah.
everyone. So instead of saying, I can go to the football game or take this client call, maybe you move the client call back an hour and you take the client call and see the second half of the football game.
That's it.
So,
And that's it. And that is really the key of what is your expectation of what all quote unquote is. And I did that exact same thing. My daughter had a dance recital and there was a woman's workshop that was 2 days. And originally I was like, nope, I can't go to the workshop because I'm going to my daughter's recital. And then I took a step back and I said, you know what? I'm going to turn this into an and conversation. I'm going to go to my daughter's recital on Saturday and I'm going to go to the workshop on Sunday. And that's perfect.
yeah,
So
we actually just did this yesterday. So we have a wealth and legacy tax conference we need to go to, but I have my last wealth master. I do a business coaching program the exact same days. So I was like, and the 2 older boys really wanted to go to this conference. And I was like, well, you guys could just go alone and then, come home and, we'll go to our conference or set up. And they were like, oh, so we're going to go alone. And then I just said, no, you know what? We'll come the first 2 days. You guys can finish the conference out, take notes for us, and we'll head over to California. And they were like, oh, that's great. So you'll spend a couple days with us and then we'll do the last 2 days and come home or whatever. So it can be an and. I think it's just we're programmed right away to be like, oh, that doesn't work. Like next.
But that I'll challenge that. And maybe that is a more normal approach, but I'm talking to a community of really high level thinkers here, including yourself, where we can choose in this moment that I'm not going to operate that way. And in that choice, much like the moment we become pregnant, all of those habits of drinking or smoking or eating sushi is instantly gone with a choice. And I really want to reemphasize this entire conversation is around how much choice you actually have. You can choose to set boundaries or you can choose to, get mad in your head. You can choose to be direct or you can choose to be inferential, meaning speaking around what you want. You can choose to believe you can't have it all, or you can choose to say, you know what, I may not get it all 100%, but I think 50-50 is still better than 0. And as you said, perfectionism doesn't exist. And that's a whole limiting belief, which is what I do with my one-on-one clients to break down what are the beliefs behind why you can't choose or you're choosing not to choose a new way of showing up.
So having said that, my question to you, the follow-up question I was going to have with you was like, what are those common limiting beliefs that arise in balancing life and entrepreneurship for women specifically? Because most of our clients are women. However, in general, I mean, I don't think it has to be gender-based. Again, it can be, just regular conversation around any gender, but what are those common limiting beliefs and how, I guess, why do they arise and how do we eliminate them before they take over?
For sure. Now, I want everyone, as I preface this answer, to know that none of this was chosen by you. A lot of, like you said, programming, that's the best way to describe your unconscious mind. And your unconscious mind is what's running 95% of your day. That's where your memories exist, your emotions exist, all of the events you've ever experienced, good or bad, reside at the unconscious level. And that can be programmed as early as in utero. And if you believe it, it can also be done generationally or certainly with past lives. So we don't choose our programming. And the majority of people are programmed entirely by the authoritative figures in their life from 0 to 7. So anything your older sibling said, you believe is true. Anything your parents say, you believe is true. Anything your teacher says, you believe is true. Anything your religious person says, you believe as truth. Anyone that your mind looks at as an authoritative figure, we take it as gospel truth, and it builds our, therefore, beliefs, the parts of us, our story. Then our critical faculty, which is kind of like our BS meter, gets installed. And that's when our conscious mind comes online. And that's when we start using discernment and logic and analyzing a little bit more of our world. And therefore, we can start to flex. Do we really believe that now? Am I still going to harp onto that? But at the core of it, there are limiting beliefs that develop based on what we saw, heard, and felt between that age range of 0 to 7. And the most common ones that get developed are around lack mindset. If our parents were really scrounging dollar for dollar, that's the only thing that we knew was money in, money out. Yes. So the
scarcity,
right?
Yes,
so the limiting belief of I can't build wealth, or wealth is for the rich, or wealth is evil is a very common one. Wealth creates arguments between parents. So I can't.
Money is the root of all evil, all the things.
The other one that I find that comes up a lot, you've said already, is I'm not good enough, or I'm not enough. I've seen I'm undeserving of XYZ. And even myself just earlier this year had to clear I'm a disappointment. Being the mom, being the coach, being the doctor, that I was disappointing fucking everyone. You can imagine how that shows up as a repellent for money and wealth and clients. So anywhere in your life where it's not happening easily, effortlessly, or you're not breaking a ceiling, there's a limiting belief pattern that is rejecting the life that logically you want, but under the surface, you're actually resisting on an energetic level. And so I
believe in that 100%. I think that where your mind goes, your money flows. I always say that, your life flows, right? So people are always like, well, I can't do that, or I'm not from that. Yes. And as soon as you think that you can't, you won't, right? And as soon as you think you can, you will. And people think it's crazy to say that, but I really feel like that energy from your mind, from your words, plays a huge part in the success, or like we talked about believing in yourself earlier offline. And I feel like if you don't have that belief in yourself and you can't find that belief within you energetically or whatever, you're going to show up not believing you can do it. And then it won't happen because you don't show up. Really, you show up with these limiting beliefs. And so breakthroughs, how do you create breakthroughs for folks?
Yeah. So my breakthrough when I work one-on-one with a client is anywhere from 4 to 10 hours. And at the 10-hour mark, I can guarantee any behaviors that are in your way will be gone by the time we're done coaching. And it's just, to put it into a really simple analogy, it's simply like, what apps on your phone no longer work? Let's delete them and install new apps so that now your phone runs more for your dreams and your desires and what you want now. And it just takes us that space and time to just be like, unconscious mind, we want to just get rid of this shit. Let's install more of this. The one thing that I also want to say, just based on our previous conversation though, too, is without creating an environment for success, your neurology can't outgrow your environment. And we've talked about some major ways that you can change that by direct communication, setting up healthy boundaries, really getting your family to step up and start taking care of things so that you don't have to. that is a huge element that I think a lot of people miss is they get inspired by a conference and then they come home and it's all gone. They get inspired by a book and then they close the book and it's all gone. And it's because their environment hasn't shifted in pursuit of the up leveling that their neurology wants, but can't grasp yet because it isn't grounded yet. And so we kind of merge all of those aspects when we do our breakthrough, and it doesn't take a lot of time. It's literally the fastest hack when we just use neuroscience to be like, okay, old programs out, new programs in. How can we get everybody around you on board? And if they won't get on board with you, how can we get you to surround yourself by eagles that get you, much like this beautiful platform that you've created?
Yeah. And we talk about that a lot. And I think a lot of our growth is owed to changing people as you change levels and leveling up with people who are doing what you want to do. Like I always say, don't go to a coach that's not doing what you want or hasn't done what you want, right? That just isn't going to bring you there because they haven't unlocked limiting beliefs or they haven't been able to whatever that goal is, become a millionaire or scale their business or, create an incredible life balance, harmony, whatever it is you're seeking, you have to find somebody that's doing that successfully. And I feel like that's another thing on the internet. There are all these coaches and all these people who talk about stuff, and some of them I know, and I'm like, man, you can't even do that for yourself, and you're coaching people. Like, you can't get your money straight. You can't get your mindset straight. You're a mess. You're messy, like all the things, right? And so, and people will follow you, but they won't achieve their dreams and goals because your limiting beliefs are still in your way. So how are you opening that for others? And I find that's really hard for folks because they can't discern sometimes. A lot of it, social media makes everything look awesome. We talked about that before, right? And so discerning like who is really your vibe or who do you want to be, sometimes isn't real. So, you have to find that perfect, I think, person to look to or to break through while you're working on those breakthroughs for yourself. And I think, there's just a lot of unpacking around how to do that as well. Right. So, and I think that the limiting beliefs of most folks are similar. Like you said, you're not good enough or you're not deserving or you can't do it or somebody's told you you're stupid your whole life, those types of things, right? Or like, you're not going to amount to anyone. So then you just say that and then you don't because you really do need that. Right. So, so you're saying 4 to 10 hours, you kind of go through this exercise of removing those limiting beliefs or trying to tap through them and then achieving this sort of next level. So what does it look like if a client comes to you and is like, look, I've made this ceiling. Now I want to be at this level, but I feel like I can't get there. And so do you just start working on a storyline? Like, how do you find these limiting beliefs and then what do you do? I don't know all your secrets, but just give the audience a little bit of an idea of if they were going to come to you, what does that look like?
Yep. So it all starts with what we call an assessment. And that first assessment part of it is for me to fully embrace and understand their model of the world. And what I mean by that is everyone's experiences are entirely different. So there's no cookie cutter recipe or place where I can just say, oh, you're an entrepreneur, you have lack mindset, we're going to do X. We also want to understand where the core problems actually for you. So the superficial problem is I'm not making enough money or I'm not, attracting enough clients, but deep down, what's the core root for you? It may be I'm not good enough, or it could be something entirely different. Like I'm a woman and I don't get to make money. Like who knows what it is. So for each client, we spend about an hour to an hour and a half really dialing in what programs specific to your mind are running so that I know exactly what threads to pull. So there's no place for cookie cutter anything here. Then once we pull that, we also release a lot of the emotions. And this brings us all the way back to the beginning. We release pent up anger and fear and guilt and shame and hurt and sadness from the past so that the neurology can breathe.
Okay.
And then that allows us to kind of really plant new seeds into this beautiful, fresh, open garden. And then we just talk about tasking and action that needs to be taken to prove to the new neurology, I want this. Okay. And that's where we get into, data dates and money dates and, booking a certain number of client calls every day and having these binary tasks.
Are your targets then? Is that what you're like when you're talking about dates? Would that be targets, or would that be like when you were saying, hey, it needs to be done by, like, or is it both?
Well, it could be any of the above, but when I'm talking about dates, is a lot of entrepreneurs are afraid to look at the data or metrics or KPIs or even balance their books, because there's this blocker around numbers and we often go off of feeling. So we make everything very logical, very analytical as well for a lot of clients. And if that is already going, then that's great. Maybe we need to unlock a task around hiring your first VA or hiring an employee and starting to delegate certain things instead of being the, control freak that we can be when we're running our own business. So we start to really play, and the best way to describe it is through the techniques. We're just taking the neurology from being hard set into allowing a lot more flexibility. And when we allow more flexibility, we allow more choice. And that's always the goal. Is I just always want to give my clients a lot more choice, because they could have pigeonholed themselves, into one business type, and they wonder why it doesn't work. And it's because it's totally unaligned, but they couldn't see this other business stream because their brain was so fixed. Now we just open everything up and they're like, oh, dang, I didn't even think of column A, B, or C because I was so fixated on Z. So that's really the goal. And it works every single time, so long as my client is coachable and willing to surrender to the process, because I can't take away free will. Right. I can unwire whatever, but if you're choosing to re-believe it, well, then you just wasted both of our time. So I'm very honest about that too. Your spells are spells, and the words and phrases you use and choose to adopt are your spell casting on your future. So if you're willing to let it go and believe that it's gone, the sky's the limit.
That's awesome. I have a question around NLP, because there's a lot of myths and misconceptions around NLP. Yeah. What are, I guess, some of the most common misconceptions or myths you encounter about NLP, and how do you address them with your clients?
Yeah. So NLP gets a really bad rep as a mind manipulation technique. And quite frankly, what it is we all have the same neuroscience. So if we can communicate better with other humans, we can connect better. And the more rapport we have, the more we can build trust. Now, like I have a pen in my hand, I can use this pen as a shiv, or I can use this pen as a beautiful writing, creating tool. So everything is always up to the hands of the beholder of how they want to use it. I use NLP to unlock people's futures for what they want. Other people could certainly use it as a manipulative tool, but that's not what its true intention is. It's a very neutral tool. And all we're doing is the very definition of NLP, which is Neuro-Linguistic Programming, is speaking to the neurology so it's programmed for what we want.
So you're reprogramming communication, really, to yourself?
Yeah, we're reprogramming, and by knowing how to communicate to another human to allow that release to happen easily and effortlessly is part of the tool as well. Right. So, we get all up in our head. And if I just ask a question the right way, all of a sudden, all the resistance goes away and you're like, shit, That's exactly what it is. And it brings awareness. And when we have awareness, we have choice.
Okay. And then my last question around entrepreneurship I had here was, how can NLP help entrepreneurs stay motivated and focused on long-term visions? Because I feel like we have a real proclivity to hop missions or get off the train, get back on. So how can NLP help entrepreneurs stay motivated and focused on their long-term vision, especially when they're facing setbacks? So I think I have a lot of clients, I think, that could use, this answer, to help them with some daily stuff too.
Yeah. And I think you just hit it right on the head, is when we go through setbacks. And so here's where I want to appreciate that all humans are meaning-making machines. And if every time you quote unquote fail, that's a setback for you, well, that's a very interesting limiting belief that we need to remove, so that now we look at it as, okay, I learned something from this. Now I know how to pivot next time. So motivation is quite an abstract thing. I don't need to be motivated to still show up for my business. And there's also very common limiting beliefs where I can't do something unless I'm motivated.
Or unless you're passionate, or unless you're this. Like, I hear that
energy, which is a sneaky, what we call away from in NLP, where therefore it's an easy cop out. Well, unless I have energy, then I can't. And that's bullshit, because if everyone's success was driven solely off of their feeling, their positive,
we would not be on this call today, right? Or whatever.
Right. So this is where we just start to identify where and what is running that's getting in the way. Knowing that, again, you always have choice. You can be unmotivated today, and you can choose to stay on the couch, which is your choice, and you have to own it. And so now we're having a conversation around cause and effect.
Right.
At cause is when I own every choice I make and take full responsibility for it. When we're at effect, we blame everybody else. Well, my kids kept me up late. My husband got mad at me. I got triggered, and therefore I can't. Well, that's also your choice, but now you have no power.
Right.
So do you want power and take responsibility, or do you want to give your power away? And we have conversations like this where people are like, oh shit, you called me out, heard. Now we can start making some different decisions.
Yeah. No, I love that. I think that's very helpful for most people, and it can be applicable in very different situations. And so I love all of it. I mean, this conversation has been awesome. I could probably talk to you for 2 hours. This is what always happens. I have like this list of things as you're talking, like, that I'm writing notes about. So I have up here your website, AndreaMaxim.com. If folks on the call are really interested in like realigning their values and healing all this limiting beliefs and moving forward, especially around personal, professional, money, marriage, how best way to get a hold of you? Just pop on your website, or is there a wait list for your programs? Talk a little bit about the logistics piece for us.
So I only do one-on-one client coaching in this context. And the fastest and easiest way is Instagram at the Andrea Maxim, and just send me a DM, and then we'll book a call and discuss next steps.
Awesome. Okay. And then they would obviously be able to reach out to you about pricing and things like that. I'm sure it's all different based on what they need. Also, are you still practicing as a naturopathic doctor? Are you still doing all that? And are you doing that in just Canada, or are you doing that online as well? Or what are all the things around, your other career, I guess?
Right. So I have a brick and mortar practice here in Ontario, and I do see patients all across Ontario. Now, I do a lot of protective weight and perimenopausal work with women across North America. So it's the same tools, just in a different slice of the human pie, where we focus on health, fitness, and lifestyle as well. And it's the exact same entryway. Just find me on Instagram, and then just DM me and we book a call there. It's all one-on-one because it has to be. So there is, again, no cookie cutter program here.
I love it. And I love that it's very woman-centered, because there is a lot of women on these calls, and we have a community, a mighty network community of Glam and Grind women as well. So also pop that information in there under health and wellness, because I do believe, we do something called 10X Health, and it's based on supplements and making sure that we're getting what we need beyond regular medicine, and looking at, an integration of functional medicine to cover all of our bases. So, but I know there's people that love it and people that are not about it. But if you are about it, I think that's also a great way that, Andrea can help you. So I just want to say thank you so much. I mean, literally, I probably have 50 other questions, but you've answered so much. You've given us some things that are really easy to put in place, like just language changes or thought process, thought pattern changes that are simple enough that we could do even today. Like, I'm going to make a conscious effort of not saying but.
Yay.
Like, okay, and let's figure this out, right? So
yes, ma'am.
Kids too, because I tend to be an and or sorry, a or a but kind of girl, because I am super just OCD, and so everything is like, or but. So I will practice on being an and girl now, which I think is going to be, this is probably one of the best podcasts for my family, because it will change the way that we interact for sure. So, and just all the things that you mentioned today, I'm going to go back and listen, and do some better notes too, because when you're trying to listen and talk,
yes, I get it.
But just so many amazing little breakthroughs we can put in place. So thank you so much for that. I feel like this was really, really valuable. And, we're just so appreciative that you spent your time here with us today.
Yes.
Valuable your time is too. So if anyone wants to get a hold of us, glamandgrind.com is where you find myself or Rach. We both have separate businesses as well that you can find on there. But our main goal here is to bring knowledge to women and our community, and just bring knowledge to everyone about how to just be better humans, how to just show up better for ourselves and those around us, and just how to have great successes together. So thank you again for listening. And hopefully this podcast episode has brought you as much value as it's brought us. And we just really appreciate you. And thank you so much. Have a great day.